everyone, it's Mark Zielinski, and welcome to another episode of MUP Champions. And my co-host is here. So, mystery co-host, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the MUP audience?
Yeah, good evening, good morning, or wherever you are. This is Mathias speaking. First time on the MUP Champion, and we are very happy to talk about this new game from Mantic, with me having already a little bit of experience with a demo game, with available rules and unit stats. And yeah, let's introduce all of you to this new exciting thing they put up. Mark, do you have any first question on the rules, because you haven't played it yet?
I have not, but I have talked to a lot of people who have. I did go through the rules, of course, and they're definitely different. So do you want to start with some gameplay, and then we'll work into the rules?
Yep.
All right, sounds good. So you had a chance to play with your wife, and I don't know if you got another game or not. So why don't you give us a little overview on how it plays?
First of all, we had a mirror match. So we both played Basileia simply because this is what the unit stats that were available on the internet. So we used this. Also, interesting point on how mirror matches work. And we played it on the kitchen table. So literally as it is meant. And yeah, if you're familiar with Kings of War, it first of all looks very strange because it is small. It is this 24 by 42 inch is a small space. Perfect for this size of game, but it feels strange if you used to the larger ones. And my wife has no experience at all with war games, and we managed to play a game in about 1 hour and 15 minutes, the 6 turns, so it works very well. We for sure missed some rules and details and such, but it works very well for people who are new to the hobby. And I think if you're experienced, you get it done in 30 to 45 minutes. And our first impression is it works great for what it is. Also, rules difference, choosing the different scenarios. It teaches you how to handle basic stuff. So if you're coming as a really new player in there, you can handle it. First 2 rounds of asking questions, third, fourth round, you are into the game. So the usual Mantic style simple rules. I think the biggest difference for me in the says are the scenarios, because you have progressive scenarios. So objectives are counted not at the end of game, but at the end of each round, which gives a different dynamic to the game, because you don't need to think ahead what you do, where you end up at turn 6, but more like what's happening at the end of this turn or this phase. And there are also scenarios in there with asymmetric objectives. So the attacker has a different task than the defender, which also makes for a fun and interesting game, because the option to how to prevent your opponent from scoring is different than just sit more units on the same objective if your task is different. And yeah, from the gameplay point of view, it's the minor details that makes it work. Like we have experienced from Kings of War, when you advance with a single pivot, and when you march at a double, no pivot at all. In Champions, you get 2 pivots on normal movement and a single one on advance, which makes movement much more dynamic. Also, you have shorter movement ranges, which works on the small cable. So they have really adjusted everything down to how you play on the smaller space. You have more freedom in movement with shorter ranges. Also, the terrain interaction is there, because the larger pieces that are there, because you have this small table space, terrain has a much bigger impact when there's a wood in the center, because the players place the terrain before you roll the scenarios, if I got it right. And so you need to work around that one. And it also is like the different terrains, the chosen one where you can't march through terrain as usual, but not all of them block line of sight. Not all of them can be moved through. So a wood and a difficult terrain or a blocking terrain gives them a whole new dynamic on how to work things out. And because the players place the terrain, both players place a piece of terrain, you already can adjust for your own gameplay if you want to use it or hinder your opponent.
Very, very cool. Did you guys use the champions orders to give the orders to the units? Did you see the card? I think that we got from the Countercharge live stream. I think they posted the card. So you did use those?
But by the time of recording, also Mantic posted the orders on their website already. So we used those, and it gets a nice bluffing element to the game, like giving the unit where you expect a charge in the next turn increased defense, or add unit strength to those where you think your opponent will go in for scoring. It helps. It's also important to get around for thinking about keeping one order back to have the token for a nerf reroll, or to reroll one dice for the nerf roll, which is much more impactful than just inspiring, because like my wife had a situation rolling a 6 and a 5, and you force her to reroll the 6. That helps a lot in some situations. And it's also like going into when she placed her increased defense on a unit I didn't charge, it feels like wasted for her, of course, while I say, yeah, definitely a point for me in that case, because she wasted her order on something I didn't do. So there are elements to it. And looking through the known orders now, there's always, or from the both known, the Basileia and Abyssal, we have seen there's usually a offensive one, a defense that gives any attack bonus in meal or increased damage, a defensive one, which for Basileia is +1 defense, a simple one. For Abyss, it's reroll regeneration. And then the gimmick one that adds this special effect that is more for the themed for the factions. And this is also something that now that I have played works well with the number of units chosen, because when I first heard about champions, I was a little bit hesitated if 3 units plus a champion works, because I would have said a 4th unit with the models that are inside giving multi-basing would have been a better option. But now you have this 3 units plus a champion and 3 faction orders for those units. That works really well, because you usually give each unit an order, and if you would have a 4th unit in there, you would need a 4th faction order that it would work the same, and then it would get more clock and things like that. So it works elegant as it is. And also for the table space chosen, 3 units are enough to get a dynamic play. And they adjusted the defense, movement, and the attacks for everything. So in our demo game, it took the 3rd round before the first unit died. So, and this is with me playing on the objective and my wife trying to kill everything I had. So she threw everything she had onto me, and I just tried to score. And it still took until round 3 until the first unit died. So this is like not a game where Alpha Strike might be an issue. So for everything hesitated, because it's being a classic turn-based game with I take my turn, movement, shooting, meal, and then the opponent. Alpha Strike isn't a problem. You don't lose unit very fast. It takes first round, you unlikely to have an engagement. Second round, you see the first attacks coming in. Third round is where you start losing units if you focus.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's where I thought that a big question was, how durable are the units? Are they just going to die right away? So, but with the adjusted movement, you found that, moving people, or moving, hitting, dying is kind of rounds 1, 2, 3 out of 6.
Yeah. So in the trailer, we have lost at the end of the game, I had 3 units left out of 4, and my wife 2, which I had a lucky roll in between. So, like she tried, and she was really unlucky. She tried the whole game to get my cavalry out, and they summoned up to, I think at the end they had 10 damage on it, and she still didn't manage to took them off, which was then what won me the game, because they were on an objective and didn't want to die. But it's not that deadly what people first think at. So like you have troops or regiments, and then it's like in Kings of War, a flank charge and they are gone. It takes some force to get in there. And even if you take a flank charge, you don't have that many attacks, and they have a good nerf roll that and that there's only a route value and no waiver. So it keeps getting going literally until they die. So it's not as bad as people might have assumed in the first place, when you just have a small table, first turn charges, take out an opponent unit and an alpha strike, and then the second round is just scoring the objective. No, it really plays like in Kings of War. It takes a while until stuff is going to happen, and then it can happen really fast. Sorry. Which then really helps to keep the game short as well. So it's not like you play for long until the end. So it's like that the first round take the longest, like in Kings of War, and the last rounds are usually played the fast, just resolving what is left and call it a day. Which then also gets into, because there's one scenario where the rules suggest to play 2 games in a row, with switching the attacker and defender role, and then go victory points, collect them both after 2 games and see who wins. And with how fast the game plays, that's perfectly fine. No need to assume this is going to take hours or needs a whole night to do it. You are still done in it. Of course, it takes double the time than a usual game, but playing 2 times or more is really not a problem. And you can take this like in a game night at home or in a club, playing 2 games, 1.5 hours, be done. It's a reasonable sized one for this in this case.
Very cool. Did you just play one scenario, or the way you were speaking there, you played a couple?
We tried to play 2. This was just so the last game we played in I played one with my wife and one with my son. So just to keep things a little bit different. While the first one was just a short overview over the rules, not going into deep. With my wife, I played a proper game to really keep a feeling how it's for a newcomer to the game, because my son is already experienced in Kings of War. He sees things a little bit different. And he's also disappointed that there are no Redkin coming this year, so that's on him.
Well, talking about that, you talked about the mirror match, and I've actually had that question for some of the people that we've been interviewing, here on our ramp up for champions, is the mirror match. So what I was thinking was, well, if you don't have Ratkin, okay, pick a faction that you kind of like the rules for, or basically the rules for the Basileans are out. You can grab them, and then just mount up a Ratkin hero on a base and just put some things together. You could use the hack paws for the Basilean cavalry, and then
Yeah, you got the shooting units and things like that. Yeah, it works.
So just rename it, put it on a little spreadsheet, or just put some tape on there or whatever, and badoom, you're playing Ratkin. And you didn't think the mirror match was an issue, though. It was an enjoyable game.
Was still enjoyable. It was surprisingly enjoyable for being a mirror, because I first thought, mirror matches, everyone doing the same. But it's as people make different choices with their orders and play different objectives in certain scenarios, a mirror match is still different, because you don't have like both having literally identical armies. It still plays different, because you make different decisions with who gets what order in which phase, who is standing on the objective and who is trying to crush the opponent. So it gets a different dynamic when, like, I try to use my cavalry to go behind the line to score the back objective, while my wife tried to go to use it as a hammer to go in front and crush my units. This worked differently, despite being a mirror. So I don't see a big issue here when people take the same armies against each other, especially if you use other models for it, because then it will work fine. Like someone being upset that there are no Redkin yet, using the Goblin box, use the Redkin models. This works. And you can play against each other. So if you have a friend who already has an army and who wants to get into, and you just want to go, and you are really into one faction, so you can use one faction box with the rules to play two armies in a mirror if you have the models at home already.
Yeah, I think that is a really good way for playing it, because I know a lot of people are thinking, oh, I got all the models already, I just need the heroes, why do I got to buy the cards, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, if you buy one, just like we were talking about, you could just model them up and, come up with something. And you will probably have to paint a hero, because the heroes are on either 40 millimeter or 50 millimeter bases. So you're probably going to, or you could rebase it and just, stick it on a bigger base if you want, and just for pushing the models around. So the possibility exists to play, with just one of the boxes.
I mean, for sure. And if this is like you ever wanted a specific army that isn't yours, but you were interested in the models or the theme and just wanted to say, I want to put that on the shelf, it's a perfect opportunity to buy one of those, because I know a lot of people like the Twilight Kin, but starting a new army for Kings of War and buy all the models was a downer. So you can now, if you like one of the models that it's in there, buy the champion box or the company box, and use the rules for your models. You got two armies, one for an opponent, maybe a family member or a friend you wanted to give to it. Say, you now play those, I play with mine, let's have fun. And you get the model, the collector's opportunity. If you want to have all factions in Kings of War, those company boxes are really suited for that thing. Or if you just want to have one frame or one model of each new unit that is around, they also work great for that, because it's like being again with the Twilight Kin, you get one skiff, you get one frame of the Impalers and the mutants. If you want to collect, or just were always interested in the paint, I want to know about that skiff, but it isn't available as a single model, and a single model isn't really something you want to play, you now can do that with a company box. If you don't want to play Twilight Kin and just wanted to work with the models, use the rules for your army, model it up, it works fine.
That's fantastic. And I agree with you. I'll be that guy that probably picks up all of the companies, because I'm going to do that. And I've got all the models already. I'm just missing the heroes and the rules cards and things like that. So, but I'm going to pick them up anyways, because I need the cards. And I know a lot of people are upset about that. But, on the other hand, Mantic's a company, they got to sell you models. So, go ahead and buy the models. I know some people are, well, I don't know which company box I want to buy. I need to see all the rules to figure out which company box I'm going to buy. So I specifically asked Andy Burtis about that, and it doesn't sound like it's going on the companion. So, because they really want you to buy the company boxes and get the cards. And it's not so bad. I mean, they're $55 US pre-tariff here in the US. So, so what are they, 50 euro?
It's 50 euro MSRP. My go-to shopper usually has them in for 44 euros. The company box. Yeah, that's a decent price. It's a little bit more expensive than the ambush boxes, but you have to think you get more variety than in the ambush boxes. Like, not the same units in there. It's different frames. It's a hero in there. It's the cards in there. So, yeah, they are a good option for collectors as well, and they're not that expensive. Like €50, and then you add the usual 10 to 15% discount from the shops. That's doable. Also, the 2-player set I see is up on usually €105 MSRP and 92 or 91 euros after discount. So this is something you can work with if you're interested in the game or just collecting. And if I see correctly, they are about half the price of the army boxes, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So if they were the same price at the ambush boxes, it would be a no-brainer. So, I mean, you get more frames in the ambush box, I think. So, but you are getting a resin hero. And so that's the big difference, I think, between the two, because you're putting resin in the box. And these are the new master crafted resin, too. So they are super high resolution, 3D printed heroes. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they can produce those and get them out on scale out to the world, so to speak. And so, but it's exciting, though.
Yeah. I mean, there's as always, the existing players always are about to want to have free rules and play with the existing models without buying stuff. And I know some people hesitate when they don't have the rules for something and want to know the rules first before they buy models. And I have to say, with Kings of War in general, this isn't a big problem because you can literally just play what you like. You don't need to know the rules. There are no wrong purchases that you buy something you can't use later on. And the company boxes, what I have now seen from the rules and the unit stats, I would rather see to have the lore and the background available so you can choose what theme you like and not choose by the rules. I don't need to see the rules to know what I like. I want to know the background and see what background of each hero is the one I want to play. And think for those people it's ideal because the lore is in the rule book. If you're just interested and don't know what you want to play, you still can buy the rule book, look into it, read through the background, and then buy what you like most and don't care about the rules because the rules are good, they are balanced, there is no issue. The gameplay or the factions play kind differently, but it's not on a level that you say you can't handle that if it's not your playstyle, because you can play, as I have seen now with my wife, the Basilean mirror match. She plays more aggressive, I play more defensive. It worked in both cases for the units that are there, because it's also a little bit of mixed units. You don't have a one-sided army on any of those preview boxes we have seen, because it's usually a unit with more defense, with more offensive, a mixed unit, or a fast unit combined with slower units. So it's not that you can't use them if you say that's not my playstyle, or you are afraid of that's not being your playstyle because you don't know the rules. It's also narrative-driven game, so it's more play or buy what you like the look of the models, or where you see the background is what it's yours, and you will feel more comfortable than just going by the rules.
Yep, I agree with that. So how did you find shooting? You would have had a crossbow block on each side, so I was taking a look. The range is 12 inches. So how did you find shooting in the game?
Shooting isn't how to best describe it. It's not an issue from that point. What some people may fear, it adds a tactical element, because you have this. If you can shoot something, most of the time the cavalry can charge you back. So unit placement is still important to prevent charges or to move out of arcs. So it is, again, it gets a tactical element that also with a shooting unit, you want to be in the flank of something because you don't want to get charged back. And 12 inches when charge ranges are 8 inch for infantry isn't that big of a buffer. And if you want to shoot the cavalry, they can charge you back the next turn. So you need to be careful to just go straight up. You cannot make a firing line standing behind and shoot, this won't help you. You don't do enough damage to kill something in one go, and you put yourself on a risk if you don't care about unit placement. They are a nice thing at the end game, because we had in our game both our crossbows sitting on an objective on opposing sides, not wanting to move from it, trying to add on attacks in shooting. But it's also in the later game, you only have 3 units. So if you have one shooting unit and the others are engaged in melee, there is no target anymore anyway. So this is more of a first turn, second turn unit to put some damage on, to put pressure on the opponent, but not to take out something. Maybe mid-late game when there's a favorable melee combat that didn't go as you want, and then it's better off to shoot the unit instead of making another charge, or where I don't want to go from the objective to move into close combat and then shoot the unit. But it's not like people may think, yeah, there's a shooting unit inside, so whatever I do, I can stay back and win the game just by shooting. That's not possible.
Okay, yeah, they only have 8 attacks, I think, so it doesn't look like something that's going to overwhelm the game. So that's good, because shooting has always been a thing in Kings of War. So I was wondering how you were feeling about that.
I mean, I'm also playing elves in Kings of War, so I feel pretty comfortable about shooting. But what also I've seen from the boxes, what we have now, is there's usually a shooting unit in most of them.
Yeah, we also have spells too. So
that I don't think there's any box yet without any shooting. As I said already, the boxes are similar but different. So because usually you have a fast unit, a defensive unit, and a shooting unit, be it with spells or ranged attacks. But I think also Northern Alliance, they have the javelins inside. The Twilight Kin have the mutants, I think.
They have the mutants and the skiff. So, and I know the ogres are going to have the ogre shooters. We saw them, I think.
So it's not a one-sided thing that one army has so much shooting that they can overwhelm it and the other one can't react. So if both just want to stay back and shoot, yeah, fine for them, but it won't win them the game or get things very dynamic. You want to go into close combat and use your options. But so it's like every army has a little bit of range combat or something that put pressure on the opponent. And this helps because standing back and wait until you're dead, this works. You can accumulate enough damage just by shooting on a single unit to take them out. It will take 5 turns, but it will happen. And so if your opponent doesn't react to your shooting, they still have a problem, but you can play around it. It's not like a one-time thing and then you're gone. So I don't see it as, it really adds a tactical element instead of just being annoying like some people feel about it. It's like for 2nd edition Kings of War.
Oh yeah, it really dominated in 2nd edition Kings of War. We had to, I believe shooting is the reason we got 3rd edition Kings of War. So just to try to correct what was going on.
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of things that shooting was. So I think a lot of people, when they think of shooting, are still just thinking of those old days against certain opponents when this really was a dominating thing. But it's now tuned down. It's a tactical element. It helps. It can put some damage on units you later want to take out. It can put pressure on an opponent simply by placing a shooting unit in a certain way, because especially in the later game when you already have damage on them. But it's not like you win by shooting alone or any of the boxes has enough shooting to make this a problem.
Elo, 520. Kacper from Kings of Warsaw Club here. 7-8th of June, 2,300 points, 6 rounds, 40 players, and only one to beat them all. Save the date, and I see you soon on Kings of Warsaw GT.
So how'd you feel about the fixed lists? That's somebody, replayability is a big thing people are talking about, but I'm kind of excited about the fixed lists. So it's kind of like buying starter decks for like Pokemon or Magic the Gathering. You're buying that starter deck, Now, can you change it up? No, at the present time, no.
I hope they won't add anything of list building in there because I really like the fixed lists. And that's being me, who was also crazy into deck building in the Magic days and who likes to write crazy lists for Kings of War. But this is like a different game with a different aspect. And if you really, I haven't played a lot yet, so I don't know if it gets really boring by the time you always play the same. But it's more of a game where when you want to play a different list, you buy a different box, because there isn't enough in the box anyway to make really suit to completely change how the army plays. Because if you have, like with Basileia, what are your options with the models to change the crossbows for a second spear unit or add a second crossbow unit without buying more models? And at the point where you need to buy more models to play, you can just play another box and play something different.
Like full-scale Kings of War. So I totally agree with you. I do not want list building to come into this. I think they've got it perfect. It is basically the starter kit.
Yeah. What I'm curious now is, or what my next thing is I want to try out, is to check how much you can get with an ambush box. Like you buy a champion box, you buy an ambush box, and check how many points it's possible to get out of those two. So, because if you can reach a larger level for ambush, this would be an ideal follow-up. So instead of just adding list building to champions, you have your company, you want to play something more, you want to play list building, many things, buy an ambush box, multi-base this unit, get up to 750 points, play ambush. And I think that game really well replaces ambush or 500 points or 400 points to 500 points ambush as the entry level. Ambush is a good game to start Kings of War when you already know how to build models, how to write lists, how to multi-base or convert anything, because you don't need to build the models as they are on the box cover for ambush, but a lot of new people struggle with, okay, you don't have a hero inside, you need to build your own from the plastic model. You don't have enough bases inside to build a larger list with the models, despite there being enough models inside with multi-basing to get you more points out of it, but you're missing the basis for that thing. So it isn't that easy to start with an ambush box if you don't have anything at home. Because if someone buys the box, start building, says, okay, this is a 500 point list I want to play, I don't have the basis for it. I need to go out and find somewhere to buy multi-bases, which isn't always an option, because I know I don't have a store close to me that sells multi-bases in the right format. I need to order them. So if I would say, if a new people starts with ambush and needs to buy bases again, they maybe already get turned down because they cannot start right away. With champions, you have everything you need. You have this list, you have enough bases. Even if you say you don't want to paint as so many models, you'll use less models per base than suggested by the pictures. This is fine. You have leftover models for later. You can use them in ambush if you increase or not, sell them off, give them to a friend, whatever you do. It's not an issue. And you can also start right away, because this was also a topic they have come up. If this gets the Christmas Day check, like get this box for Christmas, can you start playing in the afternoon? And well, you can, because you have the bases inside in the right format. You don't need to build the models and paint the unit before you start playing. You just can play right away with the bases. It gets more fun with the models, of course, but if someone is really eager just to play and not in the modeling side of the hobby, they can just start playing it. You can even go so far and like use blue tack or any other adhesive to stick the cards on the bases to know which unit is which and play that way. It's also perfectly fine and fun. There's no need for the models if you don't want to go into that part of the hobby. and if you just want to have a nice game.
That's an interesting way to think about it. Definitely. So we're going to have a future episode, folks, that we're going to go over how to be new and get into Champions, because opening the box, they say, is, you're a gateway into the hobby, but I think you need a little bit more than that. So we'll come up with our tips and tricks for you, because again, a big focus is how do you get new players into the game?
Yeah.
And definitely. And I just wanted to mention, the second you feel like you need list building in this game, you're ready for Kings of War. So as soon as you start getting bored, the whole idea is that, okay, we got a game for you already. So we don't need to modify Champions. We already got a game for you to go to, and it's a great game with a great community. So you get to graduate.
Yeah. So I think it's a good transition also from the rules. The rules are different, but not that big of a difference that it is a brand new game when you go to Kings of War. Like, it also has some minor things in there that teaches you what makes rank and file gaming interesting. So you will know all those fuzzy what is the larger game about, even if some of the rules are different. So, and it's really just it's the game Vanguard wanted to be, and this I say as someone who really likes Vanguard. But it really teaches the small things about Kings of War, that flanking is important, that unit placement, what's the deal about multi-basing, what you can do with the modeling. It's really a nice entry-level game. And also for the rules are different to make it work on the small scale, but you see where they are coming from, that things that may be different. And I've also heard of some people who think already about that this might be pre-shadowing what changes we see in 4th edition with Kings of War, but I really hope they keep things different. Some things work well in that space Champions is. I don't think they will work in Kings of War in the large game. Specifically when we say when you have a rear charge, you don't dribble your attacks, you just double them and then you hit better, which sounds nice or easier to resolve, but it changes a lot because the potential damage is a lot different. When you have 10 attacks, you dribble it, you have 30 attacks, you can take out most of the units in Kings of War in a single charge. Especially if they're already damaged. If in Champions, because they're just doubled, it still hurts because the unit are different. I don't think that there's any unit in the game that has enough nerve where you would need 30 attacks to make a difference. So this is already adjusted for the size and the stats of the game, so it wouldn't make sense to take this over to Kings of War, because it would really change how resilient units are from a rear charge if you take away the potential damage of triple attacks.
Right, because you don't have legions and hordes and stuff like that in Champions. You got troops and a regiment and a single war machine. It's a different scale of battle. So.
Yeah, so I don't think that this will translate, or a lot of those things will translate to 4th edition, because they're really made to be working in the small design space of the small game, and they don't would work well if you scale things up and have legions or hordes or big units around. Same as the waiver value not being there, this works because it's a small game and makes the units more resilient for keeping things dynamic. Before units die. In Kings of War, that's an essential element to have wavered units around. I don't think that it shouldn't be removed from that game. It also changes the complexity of the game and the depth, because you just have more stuff to think about also for the movement when there's just a single turn per movement, or a single pivot in the movement in Kings of War, where you have 2 in Champions. In Champion, it's needed to keep the game dynamic. In Kings of War, it adds another level of complexity because you can't do everything in one turn, and we have to think more ahead of it. What I might see to change is to have progressive scoring in scenarios, because this is something that I can see going to Kings of War. But this is also so from a gameplay point and rules point of view, it's a natural progression now with the third edition. So you play champions, then you go into ambush, and you are already ready for those details of rules that Kings of War brings with it. The game prepares you really well despite minor differences. So you still need to read the rule book, of course. Not going over with that people just, it's a similar game, I don't need to read the rules because there are differences. And I think this might be something that even the existing Kings of War players who try to look into Champion may struggle when they don't read the rules correctly, because the hidden details that makes a difference are likely to be overlooked when you go into the game. Like, I know the rules, I don't need to read it, I know how to play. No, you don't, because you will overlook those small differences in the games that are important to handle. And so, which also adds in that experienced players might not be that advanced when they're playing against new people. So the advantage of being experienced in Kings of War is there, but it's not that dominant that someone who hasn't played the game of Champions yet can dominate any new player starting.
Right. So, well, that sounds like a perfect segue. Do you want to dive into the rules and take a look to see what is different? Or did you have anything else you wanted to mention on gameplay?
Not yet. We can go to the rules now. I think it's a perfect timing.
Absolutely. That's a perfect segue. So we're going to go into those. So we just I guess we'll start at the top and we'll get going. We do have the rule book, so we'll just go through those and see. We'll have another episode on the cards and things like that, and we'll be able to go over those in a little more detail. But let's just kind of go over the basic rules. The one thing to point out is the ranged stat is now ST for shooting. So they felt that was easier for new players. So, but I really like a lot of the rules changes that they have in the game, and I'm really excited about it because, as most people know, I have played 500-point games since first edition, and of course, all those games either had 90% of the forces that we had 4 units, 3 units and a hero. And sometimes you'd have 5 just because of points, like goblins. They're very low pointed. And the one thing to point out is that for small point games, there's rule changes. So like we had some house rules back in the day to make the rules and everything else like that fit for small points. And Ambush has some special rules to make that fit. And Champions has some special rules to make it fit. It's just small points, Kings of War, and it's stuff that I really, really enjoy. So, but just starting off at the top, facings and arcs and leader points, it's all in there. So not a problem, no real change there at all. So that's something that you're going to have to deal with. So your arcs and everything are still the same. So the next thing is line of sight. So line of sight is different because you don't have all of the terrain out there. You've got blocking terrain, obstacles, and things like that, but you do not have hills. And so that makes a big difference. So there's no height in the game. So if your line moves through another unit or the trees or the impassable terrain or something like that, you can't see it. So it's not like you can see over your units in 3rd edition Kings of War right now. So do you like that, Matthias?
Yeah, it simplifies things a lot for new people. Also, the terrain features are distinctive enough with different features. And also that there's no height in there makes it much more straightforward for new people, because you don't get this gotcha moments of your cavalry can charge something that you thought was safe because you moved the units around and things like that, because they are behind the unit, still can see it and things like that. So it makes things a little bit more predictable and a lot more simple in that regard. So I really like it for the small game, also for the name change, shoot instead of ranged. How I feel about it's, how to say, having the phase being named the same way as the stats might confuse people. So having a ranged stats and a ranged phase isn't as straightforward as you might think. So a shoot stat and a melee stat with a ranged phase and a combat phase is much better, in my opinion, and both having the same name.
Yeah, so I think that's why they made the change, and we both agree. I think that was a good change. So speaking of changes, also the rounds and the turns have changed. So definitely. So now we've added a champions phase in the beginning, which is where you assign your faction orders to the different units that you have on the board. And then you have your regular, move, ranged combat. And then there's the end phase. And the end phase is important because, as we mentioned before, there's progressive scoring in some of the scenarios. So that's where you go ahead and do your progressive scoring. So how did you find that in your games? You think the turn structure worked well?
First of all, I'm not sure about it, but I think there's another name change in there, as rounds and turns are a little bit different than they are in other games. Because it might be because I'm used to translated versions, but in the past there was sometimes the difference between the player turn and the game turn. So like having my first turn, your first turn, and this is the one game turn. Now we have rounds and turns. So I take a turn, you take a turn, and both turns completed are a round. Makes it a little bit more clear on how to handling certain things. Not as obvious if you're used to other games that use turns for both things. And I really like that we have a combined starting phase for both players with the orders. This might be something that they could add in Kings of War in 4th edition, because it really gives another level of gameplay with how to place your orders and this bluff factor, and also that there's a combined end phase with scoring. So you're not just scoring in your turn and then your opponent doesn't score at all and things go back and forth. The middle phase, think they should have called it anything with a phase, because you have the movement ranged and combat phase, and this is then labeled as turns. Might be a little bit misleading, but I really like how it is structured at the moment, because it really feels similar enough to Kings of War or to rank and file in general, because most rank and file games out there use turn-based mechanics, and this really feels it feels home for rank and file games in that structure, with not being too extensive and with the progressive scoring still being dynamic, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I also like it that it keeps both players engaged in the rounds phases, you know what I mean? So you start together, you each take your, turns in series there, and then you wrap up together. So it just I don't know, for me, it just kind of keeps you engaged with your opponent, which if you're playing at a kitchen table, you're a lot closer to them than 4 feet away on a big Kings of War table. So, you want to interact with your opponent and things like that. And with the smaller board size, I'm sure you didn't have any issues reaching any part of the board with your hand. So, which is another big change. So,
no, that works really well also for, it also is still pretty fast, because you need to keep in mind that you only have 4 units. So moving 4 units, shooting with 1 or 2 units, and then close combat, usually 1 or 2 engagements at a time. It's still pretty fast. You don't have to sit around for minutes to wait until you can do something. It's over faster than you first think if you experienced other games. So there's no need to change anything here to make it more dynamic, because it's already pretty fast. So I don't think it would get a lot or anything at all from a different turn structure than the classic one. And it's also easier structured for the game when new people come in, because an activation-based game would also be less friendly for new players, because you have to think much more into what your opponent is doing or going to do later on with each unit. And even if it's more dynamic, it's also more thinking ahead. And the newcomers who haven't played anything wargaming at all might struggle with that, which is an easy thing here. You move everything, you shoot with your one unit, you have this one close combat, then your opponent is then moves his unit, shoot his one unit, engage, either take the combat along or do something else, and then you check for objectives, write down the scoring, and proceed to the next phase and turn.
Yeah, I like it. I really think that it's really well thought out, and so I'm looking forward to getting it to the table. And so let's take a look at that first phase. So that's the command phase. So basically, you go ahead and you put down your command token, or, which I really like, after you've lost some units, you don't have 3 units to give each a command token, or you can decide not to use it. You can hold a command token back for a nerve reroll. So I think that that's good. So do you like the decision making in that?
Yeah, it's as I've said before, it's an interesting mechanic because you both do it hidden, but it's but you know what it is before you start moving a unit. So the bluff factor is which unit gets which order, because in the champions phase, but there is no gotcha moment late in the game because you already know then which unit got which order at the end of that phase. So it adds something without the disadvantage of hidden orders might have, of this gotcha moment that you say, okay, this should be a clear win, but now you have +1 defense, so it's not that clear anymore. You know that in advance, so you can play around it if you want to. And also the nerf reroll is an important thing because you only have, I think, 1 inspiring source monster in all the boxes, which is your champion. That cannot be everywhere. So, and if you really want to use the wide table, because you have this 40-inch wide setup, you want to use that one. Having a reroll for the nerf for a unit that is far out there if needed, really keep things going. And it's not like a risky business to send a unit away from your champion and keep the block together. So this also, I think, lets people play more risky in spreading out instead of pushing everything together around the champion through the middle, because you don't need to keep everything in inspiring range to keep those alive. And I think as the reroll is only 1 die and not the full nerf this, it's also actually a little bit better than inspiring in most of the cases, when there's usually 1 dice with a high roll and 1 with a low roll.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very interesting. And, spreading out is another thing too, as opposed to having the quote unquote Death Star unit. I don't think we have a kill scenario. So, just going out and killing your opponent isn't the game. The game is really going out, maneuvering, grabbing tokens, pushing units across the board and stuff like that. So, the idea is to be dynamic and moving, and spreading out is possibly an advantage. It all depends on how you want to play your company.
Yeah, exactly. So it goes away from the classic skirmish game mechanics really into those rank and file games where it's all about moving and scoring objectives and not to kill as many units as possible to win the game.
Yep, absolutely. So very cool. So next up, it's the movement phase. And, all the classics are there. You've got halt and change facing, advance, back, sidestep, at the double, and charge. So, but there's a twist with most of them. So halt is, halt. You don't move. So, but you can pivot around your base, or your center, I should say. And then there's advance. And again, the big change is you can do 2 pivots. So it's like everybody's nimble, which, as Mathias said, really keeps the movement dynamic, and you don't get stuck all the time where you're in a thing where you can't turn, where you've got all battleships, so to speak, in a tight area trying to bring their guns to bear. And then you have back, and so you can go backwards, and you can do 1 pivot then. Sidestep, you can go half to the side, no pivots at all. And then there's at the double. So you can go straight ahead, 2 pivots again, you're nimble, but no shooting if you do that. And of course, our favorite, charge. So again, you talked about this a bit in gameplay, but Some other thoughts on the movement?
Yeah, first of all, sidestep isn't half, it's the full movement. You only half your movement if you go backwards, which is different to Kings of War.
It is. I missed that. See, there are differences, folks.
And it also keeps things, because moving forward the same space, you can move sidewards, keep things a little bit more dynamic than it is in the larger games. And you also have to remember that the board is a lot, double the size wide as it is long, or double the size wide as it is deep. So sidestep is an option that you want to use in that game to spread out, and combined with advance being that everyone is nimble, you can make this 180-degree turns at the start of your movement if you want to. And this is just, in that small space, so much more options to move. You really need time to think about it. So and it feels kind of overwhelming when you do it at first. Used to be more limited with your units, but you like really see when you play the games that there's so many options you can do, or there's no straightforward in how to handling, and also it makes the movement of the opponent much less predictable, because when they can go with a full move sidestep, or turn around 180 degree and move somewhere else, it's the dynamic in here is you don't really can know what your opponent is doing, like you do in Kings of War, where the options are more limited, because where you say, yeah, he can only stand or advance or hold and advance. There is no other options, because sidestep isn't a big enough movement to get him out of the charge arc or something. While here it is, you can move around much more freely, and that really helps to keep things going in, or dynamic in the small space.
Yeah, I think that's a big change. I kind of miss that. So yeah, sidestep is one of those things that I never really use that much in Kings of War. Very rarely do I sidestep. So, but it looks like it would be a much bigger deal here if you can go a full move sideways. So that could definitely, get you onto an objective. If you stand off a little bit, you could sidestep back into it if you needed to, etc.
Yeah, exactly. That's so moving. I think hardly anyone use sidestep really in Kings of War, because it's like half the movement isn't usually not enough to clear bases for other units. While if you have 4-inch movement, that makes enough room. Like you can make your crossbows move sidestep, you still can shoot, and you can clear space for units that are behind them. And this is a big change for those small games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's really good thought on moving the crossbows one way, shooting, and then you can shuffle them back if you need to. So they can get in there, get a move. Hopefully they won't catch them, and then they can move back if they need to. So interesting. Yeah, it gives you some more tactical depth. So, and backing up, half is, half, but the board's not that wide. It's only 2 feet. So what, you're deploying 10 inches in or something like that. So there's not a lot of room to go backwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Very, very good. All right. Now they actually give you a unit placement tool in the box, so that you can experiment with your moves and then put it back. Did you guys play with that at all, or do you play with that normally with Kings?
I use it normally in Kings. Didn't use it for the games with my wife. Just to keep things more simple, because she has no experience in wargaming at all. So it was like really a quick thing in it. But this is also a thing. We also get an arc tool with the rulebook. So I think this is a big deal that they put those things in, because it's like learning the newcomers the proper movement on how to do things that experienced players still struggle with it, because it's easy to forget if you're not used to it. If you learn it right from the beginning, I think that's a very big point in having people more fun, even if it looks more complicated or a weird gameplay mechanic to at first for like you don't want people to cheat or anything, but it's really like place the tool, see if you can move your unit, see if you can clear arcs, then move it back and move somewhere else. So I think that's a very good idea to have these things at a beginner's game with the rule book.
Yeah, if you think about it, it was a good point that you made. You're teaching people clean play right out of the gate. So, and it's also forgiving for the new player because they can make a movement and go, oh man, that really did not work. And then they could go right back to where they were and then do it again. So it's friendly for beginners. And on top of that, the benefit is they're teaching you clean play.
Yeah, exactly. This is I think they really thought that through when they said they aimed this one at newcomers and beginners for gameplay, because it really is.
This is Ronnie Renton, and you are listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
Very cool. All right. So next up is Charge, and there are some changes in Charge that I really like. I think it was essential for the small point game because you didn't want people blowing other units up, with multi-charges in the front rank. That was one of the things I was very worried about when they were talking about it. We didn't have this rule actually when I played at home. It didn't happen that much because you didn't have any units like that. But when it did happen, it was devastating. And so I'm glad that they changed this up. So charge is basically the same, except you can't multi-charge in the front. You can charge in the front and somebody into the flank. I would imagine you could do front, flank, and rear, but everybody has to fit. So that is also one of the rules. So very, very important. So if you're doing front, side, rear, or even front side, you got to make sure that your unit can fit. So if you're charging a smaller base size with a larger base size, you might not get that side unit in there if he doesn't fit. So that is a very important thing. So did you have any multi-charges in your games, or?
Yeah, I managed one. But also my wife got one, so it's for both. It's because you only have those few units, it's really hard to protect all your flanks all the time. And it's really like who set up his units better for one moment, for the next phase or turn, gets an advantage here. But then again, I think it's a very good change that you can have or play with a classic battle line and don't need to fear that the opponent takes out a single unit in one charge. It also helps as you don't need to have a complicated placement for the units if you really place them in a line, because there's only a single front charge anyway. And no, I don't want you to charge the middle unit, so I place at an angle and things like that. It's simplifies things for new people. And what I've also seen, I think also they have forbidden the corner-to-corner charges.
Right, and I think this is a huge, huge improvement and something I hope goes in the 4th edition. But go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so this it simplifies things in the charge phase, but also make adding a tactical layer, because it just cannot go straight forward charge with 2 units in and break a unit from the front. And it's much easier to protect the flanks from multi-charges at the beginning, while in the later game, it's more about, do I want to open a flank or do I want to score the objectives by placing my unit in a certain way? And then we are coming back to someone trying to play the objectives, while the other one trying to play for destruction. It also, the next point in the rules for resolving the meal phase, I think we talk about this later, plays into that one, because if you can't kill, you are moved backwards, or the opponent unit is moved backwards, which impacts all those things about multi-charges as well, because it's really hard to set things up and keep them that way, because it's not that straightforward that once you are charged, you keep charging until they go, or you have a charge and they counter charge until this meal is resolved. It really adds moving away from combat is an option. Also with the full sidestep move, because I just can because I am bounced back 2 inches, I can move this unit away and let another unit charge if this is possible.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, the rule I was referring to too was you can't do the corner to corner, the millimeter corner where your horde catches a regiment or a troop, because it can hit a millimeter of the base. You've got to hit a full 1 inch in order to do that charge. I'd like to see that bigger, but 1 inch, I'll take it to start. I think that's a very important change and one I'm very happy about. I know Fred and I went back and forth on all sorts of formulas on how we could put this in the 4th edition to stop that. I think it's a feel-bad moment when that happens. It's one of the things I don't like about Tournament Kings of War is when a legion or a giant horde clips my guy by, a millimeter, and all of a sudden I'm subject to all those attacks. That drives me batty. So I'm glad that they addressed it in here. I would have liked to have seen it a little bit larger. But they probably did that because of the champions are on 40 and 25 millimeter bases. Yeah. 25 millimeters, that's an inch. So I think that's where that comes in. But I really like that addition to the rules.
I'm fine with this 1 inch. It's also something that I think when we are playing in inch and not using metric or as a system, the minimum is 1 inch. So this should also be the minimum for all those kind of things. Like using like a millimeter or even a centimeter is enough for a charge is something stupid when the lowest measurement unit you have in the game is 1 inch. So because we can do this if we want to use metric system and you measure everything in centimeter, you can go on a lower value. But if the game is built around inches and the lowest measurement unit is a single inch, those charges or any contact making should at least have this 1 inch as a minimum requirement. And I think this is a good change in here. Maybe larger for larger games, this could be an option. I don't see a need for champions because like the hero is on the 40 mil base, so 1 inch would be a little bit more than half of the bases. This is okay. In Kings of War, might be 2 inches better. Let's see what's coming up with 4th edition.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of falls apart a little bit when you get to the champion size and you got a champion on a 20 mil base. So there'll have to be some exceptions put in there. But I really like the direction this is going and very, very excited about that. And I really think that it's going to work well in the game. And so that makes me more excited to play it. So actually, to tell you the truth. So there you go. So big changes to terrain, to charges. And then next up, of course, is terrain. And we already talked about this a little bit. So you've only got blocking terrain, difficult terrain, woods and forest obstacles. So, basically you're covering everything. You're missing the hills. And again, that's to simplify everything because you don't have height in the game. And we already talked about blocking line of sight and stuff like that. So one of the things is in the box set, you do get some templates for terrain. And the other thing I really liked is that they laid out kind of the size of the terrain, what it should be if you don't use the stuff that's in the box. I like the suggestions that they have. So Matthias, what do you think about terrain and what did you guys use for terrain? Because you didn't have the templates to play with.
I didn't have the templates. I used some similar sized neoprene terrain that we have around. So still 2D, but not the original one. And I think having a size requirement there is a good thing for people who want to build their own terrain or want to replace the cardboard one and don't want to use that one as a base or things like that. Also for everyone else to prepare terrain when you need like how you prepare terrain in a club or for demo games where you want to have more things around, you build them already before you got the rules or things exactly, or don't have the original cardboard templates to measure them. Having a size requirement in the rules is good. And what I like is how the different terrain features, because they are placed by the players on the table. They are tactical options because it's not, they are not the same. Like every terrain feature has its different rules, like blocking terrain that blocks movement and blocks line of sight. You have difficult terrain that hinders movement and does not block line of sight and does not grant cover because it's the flat terrain. So this is like you really just hinder the movement. You have the woods that can block line of sight, but you can walk through and you can see units inside. And if you are inside, you can see out. You really need to be behind it to get this line of sight blocking and the classic obstacle that just hinders your movement and never blocks line of sight. So this adds tactical options for the players, because where you use those blocking terrain feature, where you place the wood, where you place the different terrain will make an impact on how you play that game. And it's also simplified enough in what they have chosen as terrain features to make it not too complicated for people to remember which one is which. Because like there's the difficult terrain, usually like a swamp or a lake or something. It's flat, it hinders movement, doesn't block. Blocking terrain, a large rock, a monument or whatever, blocks movement, blocks line of sight. Woods, a little bit different, but of course it's a wood. Everything can easily remember what it is. And an obstacle, yeah. So I really like what they have done here with the terrain, and also that you get the cardboard with the rule book. Again, an important feature. I'm not sure if the neoprene they sell or they have sold for Kings of War matches the terrain features. I need to check that one, because this is the only thing that would be a downer if you get a neoprene gaming mat, but not matching neoprene 2D terrain for those who want to have it.
Right. We're not playing for car titles here, unless you're in a tournament and, they're enforcing that. It's a general guideline, but I like it. I think the woods are 5 inches basically around, and then the blocking terrain is 4 inches, and then they have an actual size for the obstacles. But I like the way that they worked it out, basically, and I think it just makes it easy and clean, and you're not worried about heights, and like you mentioned before, how you can get caught out because the cav is height 3 and your infantry's only height 2 and they can see, and blah blah blah. So it eliminates all that. I think it really cleans everything up. It does put it on a billiard table, but again, if you want all that crunch and you want lists and complicated terrain interaction and everything, we have a game for you. It's called Kings of War. You can go play it. It's immediately available. So it's even got a companion where you can go look at all the unit stats and everything else. So, we've got a place for you to graduate. So, but I like it for new players. It's the big thing. The way I think about this is I've got a friend that plays board games. So how am I going to get them in the Kings of War? A good way to do that is to start with champions. So that's why I like the way that the line of sight is laid out, because it can be a complicated part of the game. So
it is, and let's appreciate that we have cardboard terrain with the rule book, because this really helps to start. When I say you get everything you need to play in that rule book with a company box, so you don't need to buy anything else. Like this is also something with starting Kings of War, is because you now have the army box. You bought the rule book. You have the 2 player set. The dice are there and things like that. But you need the measurement tool. You need the arc tool. You need your unit placement tools. You need to buy terrain. There's a lot more to edit. But if you start with champions, you already have all those things for Kings of War. So even if you're just as a Kings of War player, why should you buy champions? Do you already have all those tools and cardboard terrain and things like that? If not, no missing and buying the rule book here.
Yeah. So I really appreciate the way that this is laid out. Definitely. And then we drift into the ranged phase. So all that terrain we just talked about is now going to come into play. because we're going to talk about fun things like cover and stuff. But, basically, I think the range phase is pretty close to the Kings of War phase, except for the modifiers are like very, very easy. There's only 2 of them. And the ranges, you've only got bows, crossbows, and flame belcher listed in the rule book, as examples. So we'll see what everybody has. Of course, you're going to have spells that are also going to go off in the range phase, just like Kings of War. So, and we already talked a bit about, shooting and how it's really kind of part of the game here, which I'm so glad to hear. That's the first time I've heard that too, folks. So very, very excited about that for sure. And there you go. So I think the modifiers are just, if you're got a halt order that turn, you get +1 because you're quote unquote aiming. And if you're firing into cover, you get a -1. And that's it for modifiers. So
yeah.
What do you think, Matthias?
See that the big difference here, where in Kings we get the -1 for moving, or when units have reload and things, this is all removed. So I think it's an interesting choice to have, instead of having every unit with steady aim so that they can move and shoot, you get a +1 when you don't move. This adds some interesting differences to Kings of War on how shooting works. It's also an option because the ranges are, bows with 24 inches sounds a lot, but you can't, if you are on the short edge of the table, you can't shoot on the other side. You just can't reach. You can only reach the middle or a little bit more about the middle. So you can't cover the whole table with 24 inches. So there is still this point in what's better, moving or it's also going moving close to an objective, or try to get this +1 for aiming and killing. So they had some interesting choice in here, and also simplified with cover being -1, which is most of the time the unit with the forest. I really like how it's done in the game.
Yeah, I think that is such an elegant, easy change. It's like the status quo is that you're moving and shooting, as opposed to sitting and shooting. And then you take a modifier if you move. It's in this case, you get the modifier if you're standing still. So I really like that. I think that it really is a good change to it. Like I said, it changes what you think the status quo is. So very, very cool. All right. Cover, of course, is the usual. If you're standing in cover, or if you're looking at a unit and you can see more than 50%, fire away. If it's less than 50%, you're in cover. And, of course, if you can't decide, roll a die. So just kind of the same, basically, which I think is very, very cool. And checking the nerve is the same. You check it at the end of the phase for anybody that you damaged during the phase. So.
Also having damage markers with the rule book, which is also an important thing in here. So recording damage, place the markers that come with the cardboard, and you're good to go.
That's a great point. And it's like you said, everything that you need as a beginner is in there. And we didn't mention this during the terrain part, but, giving a base of where the terrain is, if you put the 3D terrain on the top, you can remove it, and then you can still have the footprint of the terrain still on the board. So I love that. I love that in regular games. I moved to that for woods and things like that. We play with removing the trees. And so that gives you good, solid, basic skills as you're moving up to Kings of War, and you start it with champions and you just get good habits.
The only thing I'm missing, and I hope Mantic is adding this later to the game, would be themed cardboard terrain that matches the company boxes.
Well, you just designed some expansions for us, Matthias. I think we're going to get other things that are going to bling out the game. I don't want them to change it. I don't want list building. And they shouldn't. We already have a game for you. We mentioned that already. You want this game more complicated? We have a game for you already. But to bling out the game, those are absolutely natural expansions that they could put out, like a terrain expansion kit. Absolutely custom made for this, super easy, doesn't change the game at all. So if Mantic's listening, that one's a slam dunk in my opinion.
Let's go to the combat phase.
Oh, the exciting phase. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, I think this is basic thing, as simple as it gets. You roll the hit, roll the damage, there's the enemy's nerf. The interesting changes is coming with the rear charges, as you don't triple attacks, but just double attacks and the +1 modifier to hit. And also the -1 for hindered stays here. So again, just 2 simple modifiers, +1 in the rear, -1 if hindered. You also have a good description of when it's hindered, how this interacts, recording damage, everything is the same. Testing nerf, still the same. It's the after combat where things get interesting, because if the unit isn't routed, you push it back 2 inch straight back from all the enemies that are there. If it is trapped and cannot move back the 2 inches, you get it suffers another D3 points of damage without taking nerf it. But this is where the dynamic comes in, because for the smaller units, 2 inches back should be enough to clear space on a pivot from the unit, so you can turn away from the attacker if you don't want to countercharge and make room for another unit. Also on a multi-charge, or if you were multi-charged and you are moved not just 2 inches back, but also 2 inches to the side away from both attackers with a sidestep movement, you can clear way in here and do something else. So combats aren't locked in like they are in Kings of War. If you don't want to countercharge, there are good ways to move out of it. And I like the this pushback mechanic in the small space in here. It's also an option to have a unit pushed away. You don't need to kill a unit to get an objective, because this 2 inch also makes, if you charge a unit that is on an objective, there's a good chance you can move it away from it, because objectives, I think, is 3 inch within range. If they were slightly behind it, 2 inch moving away, you clear the objective and can hold it without killing it, the unit. This adds so much options in the small space or small game that we have here. And also something that players might have an overlook if they're not used to it, because the opponent clearing space, doing something else because it's not locked in combat, or locking in combat is really difficult without having blocking terrains or a third unit in there.
Yeah, I really think that this is something that could come to Kings in 4th edition. You know, like you said, and that was the key point, clearing an objective. You could go in there and bump people off as opposed to them just sitting there and you cannot move them. They're Sergeant Rock and they are going nowhere. So you got to blow them up or they're there. I think it leads a lot of dynamics and movement, and it keeps movement going on the board. So I really liked it. So do you think it has an application possibly in the big version, or do you think that would be something just to stay here in the small version?
I'm not sure. I think it can work in the big version. I mean, we have the optional withdrawal rule that some use and some not. I think with the 2 inch, it can work, because I think in the past we had withdrawal as 1 inch, if I remember correctly. Haven't used that one in years. 2 inch is a good size. I mean, it can work. I think would need some testing on how to play with more units, because it's really like not just how to say, because especially with larger units, it might be a problem to moving them around. Like I can't see like a troop pushing a legion off an objective just by charging it. Might not be the best idea in the rules. But you can also add unit strength in Kings of War here and say, yeah, you have to be equal or high unit strength to move the opponent away after combat. And I think that way it could work in Kings of War as well.
Right. Well, and the other thing we mentioned about the trapped, if you can't push the other unit back when it gets to D3, you get pushed back an inch. So it gives you a decision point if you want to, you kind of bounce back, if you can't push them into the trapped area. So I like that dynamic. It's subtle. It's small. There's some real elegant rules that Mr. Berman put into this game.
Also, disordered is still there. So if a unit suffered at least 1 point of damage in the combat phase, they are disordered. It's disordered basically means no ranged attacks, including spells. So simple charge to prevent a unit from shooting. That's your standard thing. Also, when the target is routed, the usual things are there. You can regroup, change facing, fall back and move D3 inch backwards, or move D3 inch forward, which is something you need to to keep in mind. Is it's still a small board. Moving 3 inch forward, if you roll high enough on a D3, it's more than you would expect on a full game of Kings of War. So this can put you really in a bad situation if you don't think about it. So also regroup in the small space and change facing. It's, at least from what I have seen now, it's really a choice in here, because there's no obvious solution when you really route the opponent and everything is clear for another charge. Or you may move from the objective, because charging in an opponent on the objective and then deciding to go D3 inch forward may move you away for it.
Yeah, it might put you in a really bad position. And I remember playing at Lone Wolf, and by the way, we're recording this on April 12th, so Lone Wolf is in full swing. I hope everybody's having a great time down in Texas. And a little nod to them, because at Lone Wolf, they have player-placed terrain, and then Champions player-placed terrain, and then right here, the dangers of moving forward. And I remember I had a game with John Fulks, and I did that. I rolled forward, and I got I had to move forward like the maximum distance and set myself up for a flank. So, yeah, you got to be real careful when you're doing that. So sometimes just standing still and pivoting around is the way to go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's see. What do we got up next? So, the nerve rolls. So nerve is basically the same. The real dynamic in there is the change on the double 6. So right now, if you get a double 6 in Champions, when testing nerve, the unit still passes the test, but in the next turn, it can only halt, change facing, sidestep, or back. So basically, it's wavered. So that's how they get wavering back into the game, because there is no wavering in general to keep the game more dynamic. But if you get the double 6, there you go. And the other thing we mentioned before, too, was the re-rolling the nerve test with the command tokens, which I think is a really, really cool add to the game. I really do.
It's an interesting point that we might see with command dice in Kings of War, because it makes it adds options. It is this late game option for your commands, where you really have to decide: do I want to put this one order down, or do I hold my command token back to make this important reroll? And because it's just not a reroll of a single die and not the full test, makes it really good for certain situations.
Right, and putting choices in a game is really important. That's the one thing the board gamers are going to say. Do I have player choice? Are the decisions that I'm going to make going to impact the game? And I think they did a really good job at putting player choice into the game. So, makes it interesting. So very, very good. So happy with the nerve. And then that's really the rules. We kind of just went through them. It's nice, basic, straightforward. The next part or the last part is, the end game or the end of the turn phase there. And, that's scenario specific. So then we get into playing a game. And, that's basically the same as Kings, but they've kind of changed it up a little bit. When you start the game, of course, you roll the D6, and then the player rolls the highest, gets to choose if they're the attacker or the defender. And the difference is the defender gets to choose 3 pieces of terrain to put down, and the attacker gets to put down 1. So, which is very interesting.
So be aware that you choose to be the attacker or defender before you roll for the scenario. And as I've already said, scenarios are sometimes different for the attacker or defender. So you might feel more comfortable to be the attacker, but it might not suit you that well depending on the scenario rolled.
That's a really good point. So, absolutely.
Hey, this is Ash Walker.
And Zakama13.
And you're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
So much universe, so little time.
And I just find that's fascinating. So, it's a little change, but I think that it's an important change, because, again, it's not player 1, player 2, it's attacker and defender. So I think and they made defender mean something because you get to get an extra piece of terrain to put down. So I think you get a bigger piece and then 2 small pieces as a defender, and as an attacker, you get a big piece and a small piece, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
So very, very cool. Did you want to zip through some of the scenarios, Matthias? Or
Yeah, I would like to, because I really find some of them to be really interesting compared to Kings of War. I mean, we have our standard patrol scenario, which isn't nothing special. You got 5 markers. The interesting point is the marker in your deployment zone is worth 3 victory points for your opponent. So there is really, you really want to go into the opponent zone in this scenario. And scoring is at the end of each round. So just scoring at the beginning, or it really can change mid-game to get with the scenarios, or you can get things back when you are in the late game, get in your opponent's deployment zone to catch that 1 3-point scenario point. It's an interesting one. And deployment zones are 5-inch on each side. And the scenario, I think the objective markers are 10, 2 at the edge of the deployment zone, and the others are on the middle line. So, Clyde 1. And more interesting point is number 2. Also, each scenario has a small narrative text on it to describe what's happening, which is for patrol nothing special. Interesting one is capture the portal. That gets us portals that open to the void. And here the thing is, the portal markers are jumping around, and your units can vanish from the game. So if you score a victory point with the portal is moved by around again, and for the unit roll a d6. On a 1 to 4 the unit remains where it is. On a 5 they are placed in the original deployment zone, and on a 6 they are moved to the opponent's deployment zone. So this is really something I need to think about it, because 4+ it's safe. But do I want to risk my unit to be moved somewhere else when I need it the next turn there, or do I want to score the scenario point? So again, choices, and also the portal jumping around makes it interesting, because you don't know on which spot the next round you need to be to score.
Oh, that one sounds like fun. So I'm looking forward to playing that one. And speaking of which, we talked about terrain before. Here you go. Expansion again. New scenarios along with terrain. I think it's a winner. Make a note of that, Mantic. What's the third scenario, Matthias?
Third scenario, Into the Lion's Den. again 5 markers, but you place 2, 1 in the middle and 2 in each deployment zones. And here we have, for the victory conditions, the objective marker in the center is worth 1 victory point to either player. The objective markers indicated in red, so for 1 deployment zones, are 3 victory points for the opponent player. So again, like in Patrol, you want to move in the opponent zone, but this time there are 2 objectives there instead of 1. And sitting in your zone will get you to, so you can, it's a little bit tricky to describe the picture in the podcast, but you get the 2 markers with 3 victory points for your opponent are 10-inch in from the short table edge on each side. So you can't really cover both with your own units without spreading out too much. But so you cannot prevent your opponent from getting both if he wants, or if he places units on one, because it's still the total unit strength around counts. So it really gets moving around. You need to focus on, you cannot get everything or defend everything, but you need to really focus on moving around. So this is a little bit a scenario that can get like moving your units in circles around the center instead of really going straight forward through the middle.
Well, that's good, because it gives you a different way to play the game.
Yeah, I haven't played that one yet. So, but really from looking at it, and this is also one where placing the terrain will get important, because which you can block off scoring or scenario points with placing the terrain in the right way to better defend it. And 4th scenario is the treasure hunt. Is also one I haven't played yet. And this is one where we have loot counters instead of objective markers. And here again, I think there's a similar one in Kings of War. And important here is a unit can only pick up 1 loot counter from each pile per turn. So to pick up 2 loot counters, you need to stay around for 2 turns.
Well, that's a good thing. So, that leaves you at least tacked in place so that, the board's not that big, so somebody can come and get you. So there's not kind of a runaway, so to speak.
So again, the choice is, do you want to pick up more and stay there, or do you want to move away or prepare for something else, or secure what you have or gain more? I think that those are nice scenarios. You really have a dynamic choice with what you do with your units instead of scoring. And number 5 is the one I find most interesting, because it's it's a variation of kill, in the sense that it's make a break for it. And in this case, the attacker needs to break through the defender's line and move units across the opposing deployment zone, table edge, while the defender needs to destroy said units.
Well, and that makes a difference between attacker and defender, right?
Exactly, and this is also where the scenario where the rules suggest to play 2 with switching sides and then get a total score for both games, so that one army doesn't have an advantage here, because I can see that certain armies might be better in that with faster units. So they suggest to just play 2 games so that none has an advantage as an attacker or defender. And also the champion, if you move the champion across the board, it gets 3 victory points instead of just 1 for the units. And also destroy champion is worth 3 victory points. So this is also, again, one where you have a big choice. If you say, do you want to keep your champion back so it doesn't get killed and give your opponent 3 points, or do you want to move close and try to get him across the board so you gain those 3 victory points? That's a good decision making in here, in comparing from playing safe to win with 1 point lead or to go all in. Also, be aware that when a unit is moved across the board, you don't have it to protect your other units that are still there.
Oh, yeah. Again, player choice. We're going to bring that in big time here. Are you going to, take them off the board or bring them in? And they're also extra points if you get them killed. So you got to be careful with them too. So I don't consider this one straight up kill. I think this one's got lots and lots of replayability, so to speak, on, how you go ahead and move the units across. And it's only 2 feet. So, but it doesn't sound like a lot of space, but the average movement is 6 inches or so for a champion. So, you're going to be on there for a couple turns. So it's going to come down right to the end. So,
I mean, would think about this. This is the best version of kill I have seen by now. So,
absolutely. So what's the last scenario we have?
The last one is hold your ground. Again, similar to one of the Kings of War scenarios, where at the end of the game, this is at the end of the round, not at the end of the game, difference in scoring. So at the end of the round, you divide your board into 6 scoring zones, and you gain 3 victory points if you are in the opposing half of the board, controlling the zone, or 1 victory point if you are in your own deployment zone. Also, the highest total unit strength in each zone gets the zone, is scoring. An interesting thing here is we have 6 zones and you only have 4 units, and each player only has about that amount of units by now, so you can't control all zones. Also, you can't defend all zones. You have to make choices here if you want to go with spread out your units and get as many as possible, or put everything into one for securing that for sure. It's also scoring at the end of the round. So it's a little bit a tricky one, because you can happen that like both players would sit in opposing edges with all of the units and end up with a draw, because everyone's scoring 3 points at each round and they don't want to move out. But this is where also our shooting units come in, because just because you're sitting in a corner safely scoring doesn't mean you won't get any damage. And also some fast units can easily make the go across it. So it looks like a little bit static from first glance, but it isn't.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you got to keep moving. So, absolutely. And it's a big one, too. Eliminating a unit would have a big impact on this because, again, you don't have enough to cover them all. And so it's one where, taking out one of your opponent's units is huge. So,
yeah.
And you should be able to get somebody across the board into the opposing unit, into the opposing side of the board. It should be easier than it is in Kings.
Yeah. I have to say, this might feel, from the scenarios or from all the scenarios that we now have, there's some where it's easier to have early scoring, like in Hold Your Ground. You moving a cavalry unit on the far edge into the opposing zone in the first round is a possibility. It will be there alone, of course, because and lost to a point, but you get early victory points, and then you can try to move back or keep it there if your opponent doesn't care, and try to score as many points as possible until it's gone. But it will also take that unit out of the gameplay, and you will have to handle the opponent's force with 1 unit less. So this is, again, you have to make your choices, and every choice you have has a much bigger impact with just 4 units on the table than in Kings of War, where you can set a cavalry unit aside and do some scoring work without affecting the rest of your army.
Right, and the big change from Kings is, too, you've got the same number of units. So, you're not facing, goblin trash army, that's got, 23 drops and all that, and you've got an elite army, with 11 drops, they're equal. There's 4 per side, so that really makes a big change in the dynamic.
There is no easy matchup going where I say, I have double the unit strength or double the units as my opponent, so this scenario really suits me well. So it's the same for both. in all cases, which is also something is really done well in the game that I didn't expect when I first looked at it, because I'm also a player who prefers to have more units instead of bigger units. I like regiments more than hordes simply because I have more of them when I focus on them. But in this case, it really plays out well to have everyone on the same level with the same number of units, similar number of unit strengths, and similar options for those scenarios. So it really it adds a different feeling to the game than you would expect when you first look at it.
Absolutely. So for me, overall, this is the game is a better version of Ambush. So, it's what I wanted Ambush to be, so to speak, because Ambush settled in at 750 points because everybody wanted to get more units and more things like that. Again, my favorite points level in Kings is 500, so this is my sweet spot. So it's basically, in a way, I guess a dream come true, so that this small game has actually become recognized as a great way to play Kings, and so I'm very, very happy with it, and I'm going to be very excited to be working with it going forward, with the scenarios. And I really think, like I said before, with expansion packs, you've got it with terrain and scenarios, and in addition to the other units coming out, we should get 2 companies a year as they refresh everything according to what Ronnie said. And the other thing I like is that, we've got it. Ronnie basically gave us a 4-year commitment. Now, of course, he can change his mind if the game tanks and it's horrible, but it looks good. I'm excited about it.
I mean, I have heard that they are already reaching out for people that are doing translation works. So I think there's a good long-term plan behind the game, because, of course, a game aimed at newcomers that should sit on the shelf of a store is better when it's in a local language. So it's great that they're already thinking about that. But it also indicates that they are having long-term plans with that game, and I don't think that they will remove it anytime soon, even if it's not as good in sales as expected first. And I think Ronnie mentioned something about 15 or 16 armies planned already, with 9 coming this year and then the next after.
Yeah, so it's going to be 17 altogether, because we got 9 this year. Possibly, now I got to correct myself. It's going to be 18, because Ronnie leaked on one of his interviews that there is another faction coming out that we don't know about in November. So he mentioned oops, that's a leak. So we should get 10 this year. And then, he said every time a Mantic does a refresh, so we get 2 refreshes a year, times 4 years is 8 plus 10. So we should get 18 factions over the first 5 years of the game. So,
I mean, not necessarily factions, but companies. I think
companies, yes, I've got the wrong jargon there, but yeah, so we should get 18 companies. So
one possibility that we have here is that a faction can have several companies. Like we have now a Basileia. Of course, it would be bad if we get a second Basileia box before all other factions got their single ones. But I think this is an interesting option to cover, is because the Basileia now, we got a different champion, or there's the possibility, add a different champion, different unit composition, and for the same faction, you get a very different company to play, like a Paladin Heavy Force for Basileia, or a Half-Elf Focus for Northern Alliance. So there are a lot more possibilities than just a single box per faction. It's really something they can expand with different heroes, with different unit composition. And this is really also what I would like to see, to have, like, this appeals to the collector as well. And if you say, okay, you got multiple company boxes for each faction, there will be a point where you say, now you have enough to play small-scale Kings of War, where you say, just another box, and you can jump in the big game without buying any of the army boxes or things like that, just from the stuff you have collected over time. And this might be something, or this is something I would look forward to.
Well, I certainly hope that we get to the point where, and we kind of mentioned it earlier in the episode, I take my champion set, I'm going to add to it the ambush set. Where am I at points wise? I really think that is going to be something I hope that they see, because I want to see the bridge built between champions and kings. And, if the game's got a 5-year commitment to it, you could just play champions if you want and have a great time with it. Or, you can go up to kings, or heck, play both, So, there's nothing stopping you from playing both. Like, this could become our Friday night before a tournament game, or, you could have a champions tournament. It'd definitely get more interesting. With 10 factions, I know people have talked about it. It's not probably designed for that, but, we make tournaments out of everything. So, what the heck?
The best way to get the game into tournaments is saying that it's not designed for one. Because, and you get
that's
people
a
out
great
there who say,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, they always said, well, AOS wasn't designed for tournaments when they put the first edition out. And then, of course, the community was already making points for it and setting up tournaments because,
that was the first thing that happened. So it's, but I can see events starting with it, because it's like, it's a quick game. This is, how to say, a downside I see with Kings in tournaments is that this single day tournaments, even with ambush, aren't getting a big traction. And it's like, because people need to drive, they say they want to make it worth, so at least a one day might not be enough, and people hesitate to make more than 3 games on a single day. And when King's Ambush would work with more games, but somehow it isn't there yet. I can see Champions being and not necessarily a tournament, but a single day event. Because at least locally we have the problem that a lot of people hesitate to go to tournaments, but they're happy to go to a gaming day, even if it's more or less similar to both, but they just don't like to be on a tournament. And see, Champions could be something perfect for a gaming day. You have a single day, you can play, I think 6 games is perfectly fine with all the chatting and having fun, possible meeting people. So you get a lot of games out of it. It's just a single day. And because it's not a tournament game, it's not a tournament, but a gaming day. Also, that can attract newcomers because you put the game out there in the wild just for people to see. I see there are possibilities, and that people might like to do this kind of thing.
I think that's a great point. I was talking to Blake about, how many games would you put in a tournament? He said 7. I think 7's a lot. But 6, I think you could definitely get 6, which, if you think about it, is a Kings of War 2-day tournament. So you could get 6 games of this in here. It all depends on how much time you put. But again, if a tournament's not attractive to people, a gaming day, if they can only come for a couple of games, they could come experience it and leave. That would be good. I would go to one. I'd be very happy about that. So, and even if you could bring 2-3 of your own companies if you're playing a regular game, or something like that. That would be very interesting, even in a tournament setting, is, just set like the maximum number of companies that you can have. And, if your one company's, not doing that well, you can switch it over to the other and come up with some rules. But us, we love tournaments. So, we're going to come up with the rules, make it happen. So, but I also think it'd be a great Friday game before Kings of War, because it's the same but different, and it's fast. So, which is what you're looking for in a Friday night game.
And not that many models to carry around, because usually when you're going to a tournament, you have a tight-backed case with all the models in it. So taking more models with you for a side game is often not too easy. But in this case, you can mostly use the models also for your army. And it's just like another hero or 2 more units you need to back that's feasible or doable, especially for those who travel by plane to events.
Right. Yeah. Like like doing fighter fight, and you got to bring a whole different army. Like you said, if you're flying to a tournament, you're not bringing a firefight army probably with you unless you're very dedicated and you've got lots of money for extra baggage. So, but or you take the chances of your models getting crunched. So, but yeah, definitely, I just see this as a good side game, for a tournament. I just really do. I think that it really kind of scratches that itch to a certain extent. And it kind of gets your mojo going. You know what I mean? It's like, do you want to get a little practice for Kings? The downside is you could be in champions mode and not Kings mode, I guess. There could be an argument made for that. But
I mean, you already get into it by having the clean play and champions being there. So this is a good training for your tournaments to actually use it.
There you go. Beautiful. That's a great answer. So, but yeah, I think it's going to be fun. I think that there's game days, tournaments, whatever that you can make of it, or, you just stay in your base and you play. I mean, most Kings of War players never go to a tournament. They're, not heavily involved in the community. They get the game, they play it at home. And so, the Joe Casual. So you are, this game is going to appeal to that. And I also, one of the big pieces too is kids. It's going to, hopefully appeal to kids. I think some of the models got a little bit of a cute factor to them. Some of them are a little more scary, so to speak, and I'm talking from a kid's perspective. But the rules are pretty straightforward and simple. You can play with your mom, dad, family, brother, sister, whatever. So I like that aspect of it too. It's not a real brain burner. So from that standpoint, but don't let that fool you. The game's very elegant.
And it's also kid-friendly in a sense that you are heavily playing the scenario and with objective based or on objective-based focus on the scenarios. So because this is also usually where something with kids is an issue with the parents is when games are focused on killing. Not everyone likes that. Not everyone wants a game with such a focus at home. And here where I say, yeah, scoring, it's not about killing each other, it's about taking the objective. This is something, even if units are killed and damage is involved, but this is something with a very different focus that is much more kid-friendly than you say any other game where it's all about the killing and nothing else.
Well, remember, they're not mentioned as killed, they're routed. So,
Yeah.
we dropped the kill word in there, but
yeah, that's on me because we are an old guy style of players, but it's like, even routed is a nice thing because it doesn't mean the unit is dead. It just means its moral is broken or it has suffered enough or it just doesn't want to fight anymore and is gone. This is we are still marking damage foe in the rules, but it's really like, it has the whole game in itself is much more children friendly when it's not focused on killing and removing damage or really in removing units, but it's this is I would say a different point of view when you look at it from a kid's point. Do I want to have, because I have two children, do I want them to play a game that is all about killing and where also the stories and rules are written in that way? While in this case, you have the scenario fluff text within there that describes what this is all about and which gives it a nice go because it's never written in. You always have secured the key objective in the scenario fluff text and not kill your opponent's unit because you are the bad guy. I really like that approach for an intro-level game that is also, it's better suited for children and kids, teenagers, while other games are much more focused on the killing aspect.
That's a really good point because I am a huge proponent of getting kids into gaming. I also love family, parents playing games with their kids. There's nothing better. I am a huge supporter of that, and I think this game delivers on that. And I'm looking forward to it. Mantic is bringing a booth to the Origins Game Fair this year, And so we are going to be demoing Champions there. And the Ohio War Kings are actually in the process of trying to move some of our Armada and Learn to Play Kings of War events over to Champions events. And so we're going to really try to bring in some families and things like that, and the kids and adults as well to learn Champions. I think it's the perfect game for that type of environment. It's a very second largest board gaming convention in America, and I think it's a fertile ground for getting people interested in ranks and flanks. So I am very excited for Origins because of that fact.
Yeah, it's good to hear.
Yeah.
I think this is really a very well-made dad game. So it's like you are a dad, you want to play a game with your kids. It should be not a board game because you don't like those. It should be a war game. I think Champions is a very good game to get into with that.
Yeah. How do you think this would go with Spiel in Essen? Have you been there before?
I haven't. I would like to go there once, but I haven't had a chance yet. But I think it would go well there. So if Mantic has the chance that we can make a booth there, I think that would be a good way to promote the game.
There you go. Mantic usually goes to Spiel, so I'm excited for them to go. So also this weekend is Salute. So Mantic is at Salute right now. I know Matt Gilbert is doing something with Epic. So hopefully they're doing some Champions, and we'll get somebody that can give us some information on what happened at Salute with Champions. So if you were at Salute, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you. Very good. Well, folks, this has been a good in-depth dive into Champions. I hope you really have enjoyed yourself. Mathias, do we got anything else? Anything else we haven't talked about yet?
Good question. We have talked so much. I have no notes left, so I think we covered everything.
Well, everything except for our future episodes, right?
Yeah.
So we've got a lot more coming at you here with Champions as more of it continues to roll out. So we're very excited about it. But this is a great episode, hopefully to lay all the basics for you and hopefully get you interested in playing the game. Very, very good. Any final thoughts?
I'm very much looking forward to the game and also forward to the upcoming factions. I'm not sure if we can't talk about him in details, but there are some great, amazing models coming up. I'm really looking forward to collect more of the company boxes. Despite I already have those models, I'm really looking forward and going for the companies. A little bit sad that certain factions aren't there yet, but therefore we have to look something forward for next year. And let's see what Mantic is coming up.
Absolutely. As we mentioned before, if your faction is not available, like you really want to play Undead, find another company and just swap in the models and, go ahead and you're playing. And one of the big fears is that we were talking about was that mirror matches wouldn't be good. But, as Mathias mentioned, mirror matches are just fine and actually probably even more fun possibly. So because
Maybe.
You're literally exactly the same. So, don't be afraid to do that and, rename everything and get out there and play with your favorite model set. I like to think of this game as all inclusive and everybody should have a chance to play. So don't feel if your faction doesn't have a box set that you are quote unquote boxed out of the fun.
Exactly.
All right. Sounds good. Well, folks, again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. I know this one ran long, but hopefully you got a lot of value out of it and look forward to more Kings of War Champions coverage from Mathias, myself, and the rest of the MUP crew. So until next time, take care.
See you.